Hi everyone, this is CS Professor Pam with Jumpstart Code, and we are continuing to learn about CSS. We are working through the material in internetingishard.com, and we are on Lesson 5, the CSS box model. This lesson will help us understand more about how to make your page look better in terms of spacing around your elements. All right, so let me first get the file set up, and then we will talk about this. So we are going to create a new folder called CSS box model. Remember, what I suggested to you is that you should have a folder with all your projects. And so in this project, I'm going to make a new folder, and the name is going to be CSS box model. All right, I am now going to open this folder. I've opened up Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to open this folder in Visual Studio Code. I actually could have made the folder from Visual Studio Code as well, but I'm going to open it up from here. All right, then the file that we are going to work on, we're going to make a file called boxes.html. And to make things easy, I am going to copy the code that was given here. This is going to be our document that we're going to work on and practice with. So I'm just going to copy all of this and go over to here. I'm going to create a new file here called boxes.html and paste that code there. Let's save it and test it, open it up, make sure everything is good. Remember, you always want to be cautious and check things as you are going along. So I'm going to open this, right click and open this with Live Server. And that is going to bring up my web page here. I'm just going to sort of separate it out so I can do two things at once here. So we'll look at this page. Let's look at this page and look at the content of our file. And first of all, make sure we understand what's in it. So we've got a heading here. Headings are block elements. And then we've got two paragraphs in here. So that's all the content that we have in here right now. All right. And we are going to look at how we can customize layout here. All right, now let us set up a style sheet. So we're going to create a style sheet called box-styles.css. All right, so I'm going to go over here and make a new file. And you'll notice here, this file is already, my HTML file is already referencing that file, but that file doesn't exist yet. So let's create the file. So here, and the name needs to match box-styles.css. All right, so this CSS file should now be linked to this file. All right, let's talk about things that we can do. Now, I'm going to tell you one of the first things that I always do when I link a style sheet, for example. I'm going to do a quick test here by, in the body, setting a background color. All right, I'm going to set a background color of pink. If I save all and we go over here to my page is pink. So that's my quick test to know that the file is connected properly. Because, for example, if the file name didn't match, right? If this just says style and not styles, then if my background color is not happening, I need to find and fix that right now. So that's just a little tip of what I always do. You want to get into certain habits that will help you as you're going through your coding. You have to be very paranoid as you are doing coding, just to make sure you check things as you're going along. All right, so let's go over here to our lesson. And we have these different types of elements in HTML: block elements and inline elements. Block elements always want to start fresh and take up the entire width of your page. All right. But inline elements can sort of be nested together. We'll see in a second. So let's take a look. In this case, H1 and P are block level elements, whereas EM and strong are inline elements. Let's look at the HTML again. So I've got inside of my paragraph, you'll notice that we have an EM. So we have some italic text in here, and we have some bold text in here. So to demonstrate what we mean by these different types of elements, then we are going to add some background color to these elements, right? And I'm just going to copy these rules and go over here. And actually, let's get rid of this. That was just my first test. And I'm going to put these in. Now, let's take a look at what these rules are before we do it. Because when you do anything, you should have an expectation of what's going to happen. So what are we saying here? Any H1 element and any P element. So I'm applying the same styling to both H1 and P elements. And what I'm doing is giving them a background color of this light gray. And any EM or strong elements, I'm giving a different background color. This will help us understand what is the difference between block elements and inline elements. So here is what the result was, right? So my heading here is a block element. That means it wants to take up the entire space, no matter what the size of my page is. Paragraphs are block elements, but you'll notice the EM and the strong are inline elements. That means they don't start fresh on a new line, right? They just continue where they are. So we can see the difference between these two types of elements there, okay? All right, now, so again, blocks always appear below the previous block. So my heading, my paragraphs, they're all blocks. So they do that, and the width of the block is based on the width of the parent container, which in this case is my window. So this paragraph, for example, the width of my paragraph is based on how much content is in this paragraph, right? If I make this longer, you can see that, right? So you have to keep that in mind sometimes when you're styling things, and realize that the width has to do with the content of the text that's inside of it. The default height is also based on the content. So you'll see in this header, if I make this smaller, then this header line has to split across two lines in order for everything to get in there, right? All right, and the width of inline boxes is just based on the content that it contains. So it's not any bigger, right? So just whatever is the inline element, whatever content that is, that determines the width of that particular element. Okay, now we can make elements behave differently by changing the display property. So if we wanted to make these EM and strong elements behave as blocks instead of inline elements, we can change that by adding a rule that we are going to make the display of these elements So the default is just whatever is the default for that element. But if I change this to block, right? So here's my page over here. Let me try to put this where we can see a little bit of both. So if I go over here and save this page, save all, look at what happened. So now I've said to make this EM a block element. That means it wants to start on a fresh line, and make the strong a block element. That means it wants to start on a fresh line. Now that's not really what we should want to happen here, but it shows us that you do have control over these things, right? But that's not really a good thing. So if I want to take it back, I can either take the display property out completely, or I can change it to inline. And we will see that that will take it back to its expected behavior. All right. Now, let's start talking about the box model, which has to do with how we set up the dimensions of every element. So there are 4 important properties. Every element has content, which is whatever is the content you've put in the element. In the case of this heading, that's headings or block elements is the content. Then you can have something called padding, which is the space between the box's content and the border. The border is what goes around it, and the margin is outside, right? So here's what the box model looks like. You have content, you have padding that you can control around the content. You can set up a border around the element, and then you have margin outside of that border, okay? So let's start with padding. So here in my H1 element here, we can see we really don't have any padding right now. Remember, padding is outside of the content, but inside of the border. So look at what we have right now. I'm going to add a rule. I want to only affect my H1 element, and I'm going to give it a padding of 50 pixels. Okay, so H1 padding 50 pixels. Now watch what happens when we change this. All right, so look at what happened. Outside of this content, we are seeing this extra space. And I want to show you guys something that can be really useful. I'm using Chrome because Chrome has some useful developer tools. So if I right click on Chrome and go to inspect, then I'll be able to see some specific things about the dimensions here. So if I go to my H1 element here, I'm going to go to, here we go. Have to make this go down. If I click on my H1 element here, then I can see the layout. If I go here to the layout, I have to close this up, close up the console. And I want to look at my layout. So we want to go here to the section here that says computed. And up at the top, I'm on elements. And if I click on my heading here, you'll see this little picture that shows me that there's 50 pixels of space all around this content. So when you're trying to really understand exactly what your sizing is, using this inspect tool can be really useful. And so we'll be learning more about this as we go along. All right, so we have 50 pixels on each side. All right, now if I want to I may not want to have the padding exactly the same on every side. So when I use just padding, then that means it's the same around all sides. But if I want to give some different padding, then I can do something like this. So I'm going to copy this rule. So we're going to do something different with my paragraph. I'm going to give it a top padding of 20 pixels, bottom of 20 pixels, left of 10, right of 10. Okay, so let's save this. All right, so look at what happened to the paragraphs. They've got spacing on the top and the bottom and spacing on the left and the right, but it's not the same spacing. Now again, if I want to go in here and inspect this a little closer, if I click on, I can also click here and click on my paragraph, and you can see here the padding is 20 and 20, top and bottom, 10 and 10, right and left. Okay, now in terms of seeing that, again, it also sort of depends on the size of your window, because for example, you'll see right here, right now it doesn't look like there's just 10 pixels on the right. Well, that's because this next word is too long to fit there. So we're, it's not because of the padding, it's because of the word, right? So if I change this to where the word just fits, then you can see that there's basically a smaller amount of padding on the right and left and a larger amount of padding on the top and the bottom. Okay. You can also do this in what's called a shorthand format. So if I use only one number, then that means that same number goes top, bottom, right, left. If I use two numbers, then the first number is going to be the top and the bottom. The second number is going to be the right and the left. So the first number is vertical, the second number is horizontal. Or if I want to have something different on all four sides, I can provide four numbers, and it's top, right, bottom, left. It goes clockwise. So if I do something like this, let's change it to this rule. I'm going to copy this. So instead of what I have here, so now I have 20 top, the right is 0, 20 bottom, the left is 10. Okay, let's see what the effect is going to be here. All right, so remember my right padding is supposed to be 0. Now again, it won't exactly look like that. If this is the size of my window, then it doesn't look like I have right padding of 0. But it has to do with the words and the content. So you'll see here, for example, when I make it just big enough for this line to fit, I can see that there's 0 padding on the right and there's a little bit on the left. And again, if I use this tool to take a look at this paragraph, then we can see here that there's 20, 20 top and bottom, 10 on the left, 0 on the right. Okay, so that is our first practicing of padding. And we will go on in the next lesson to talk about borders and margin.